So, welcome to this webinar on learning needs analysis being conducted by Ripple's Learning and Certified Human Resource Management Professional Program. It's a 1-hour webinar, and in this webinar, we hope to share with you some important aspects of the crucial process of learning needs analysis, why it is needed, what happens if it is not included or done, and what are the challenges that organizations face. In this 1 hour, we will also try and give you an overview of how to conduct this, this important process of learning needs analysis in your organization, and we'll suggest some tips. In fact, we also have a secret sauce, something that will help your initiatives succeed in your organization. Great, so without much ado, we have only 1 hour. So let's get started, and I'll take you through various aspects of learning needs analysis. If you have any difficulty in seeing the screen, please let me know. So before we get started, a quick overview of Ripple's Learning. Won't take much time, just half a minute. We started in 2007 in Bangalore. We have 3 main offerings: organizational L&D, certification programs in HR and L&D, and cloud-based L&D solutions, specifically a solution called Results Lab, to help organizations measure the impact of their learning solutions. We have 35,000 people have been through a program. We have 7,000 certified professionals. We have 5 training facilities in India, and we are also present in Singapore and Malaysia. These are some of our clients that we have worked with, and we continue to increase this list every day. These are 3 certification programs that we have: CHRMP, CSP for sales, CLDP for learning and development. This particular webinar is being sponsored by the Certified Human Resource Management Professional Program, which is a very, very in-depth and incisive program in the field of HR for those who are interested in a career in HR. Right? So let's get started with our topic for the day. And what has happened is, it is no secret how fast the world has been changing in the last few decades since the IT age dawned upon us. And if you need an example of this, of organizations not being able to change with the speed of change in the world, I have 2 good examples for you actually: Nokia and Kodak, isn't it? Nokia, it seems unbelievable to imagine that Nokia, which was a sort of a synonym for a mobile phone, lost out in the mobile phone market. And Kodak, which invented digital photography, lost out in the digital photography market. So, which means there are no guarantees for organizations about how they, what they can do to succeed in this complex world that we live in. But we do know that they need to learn, they need to move, they need to be dynamic, they need to be nimble. And unless they are those things, it's very difficult to be successful in the world. And one of the most important aspects of being successful for organizations is capability building, because unless you are a sort of a rent collector sitting on a highway not doing anything and just collecting rent, I mean, that's the easiest form of making money. But it requires no growth, no personal development, no capability building. You've created an asset and you're sort of taking a toll money from everybody. But for everybody else, you have to respond to the environment. You have to build capabilities. You have to build skills. And unless that happens, also what has happened is, if you look at industries, the capability or skills have also evolved to appear as one of the key differentiators for for different businesses. So for example, if you go for an Accenture as a vendor, and you go for some other company, Wipro as a vendor, it's unlikely that Accenture and Wipro will do a very, very different job from each other. They'll use the same technology, they'll have the same kind of expertise, they'll have the same kind of output for you. But what will really make the difference for you as a customer is the kind of service that they offer, the kind of people that they have, the kind of skills that those people have, the kind of expertise they bring on the table. And that is actually one of the most important aspects of engagement with vendors now, because other things remaining same, it is people who make the difference. And people very often are an outcome of the kind of training program you have in place. Right? Training and development is one of the most effective ways to build capability. If it is done well, if it is done poorly, then training and development is just money that is wasted. So let's just do a small calculation, right? If you have around 20 people and you take them into a training room, so essentially, what is the cost involved, right? The cost involved is you are giving money for the venue, for the food. You're spending money on the trainer, on his professional fees, his or her professional fees. And these 20 people who are attending the training program that day, you are paying each of them a day's salary. So that's 20 days salary. Plus, for that particular day, they are sitting in the training program and they are not going out chasing business, closing deals, being productive. And therefore, there is an opportunity cost to sending people in training. Now, if you put all of this together, this is the cost of conducting training. And if the training is ill-conceived, if it is not imagined well, if it is not designed properly, if it does not address real needs of people who are attending that particular training, then you can imagine the wastage that ensues. It's almost tragic that this kind of effort and money and time is spent on doing something that does not lead to results, right? So if you are a novice at this, I think you would just to sort of give you a sense of this. When you conduct training in organizations, what is usually very visible is the training scheduling, the training branding, because you see a lot of mails, a lot of reminders going around. You might see a lot of posters in the organization. And of course, the day of the training, you're physically involved in the training or you're actually engaged in attending the training online. So all of these are very, very visible things that you see happening in the organization. But what is behind the scenes, what you do not see if you're not into HR or in the field of L&D, is the effort that has gone into doing the training needs analysis, which means finding out what training to give and how to give that training. Right? What is also sometimes not included is training design. You don't see the effort that goes into making the training plans or deciding what you will teach, how you will teach it, what is the best way or the best method of teaching something. Right? Similarly, there is content and collateral development. Once the training is analyzed, once you analyzed what training needs to be given, what kind of content, once you've decided that, done the analysis, done the design, you need to develop the content and collateral. Right? And finally, you need to see what was the impact of delivering the training and if it had any had any positive impact in the organization. So that is called training impact assessment. Right? Let's quickly look at why do we need to do training needs analysis at all? What happens if we don't do it? Why don't we just do training? What is the need to do a training needs analysis? You know, there is a saying, I read it somewhere. For doctors, it is true. I think it ought to be also true for training professionals. And that statement was that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. Let me just repeat that. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So essentially, we are saying that as a training professional, as an L&D professional, as a as a coach, as a teacher, you are giving a prescription to the operations team, the business, and recommending that they should let their team undergo this training or that training. And unless your prescription is based on some sound diagnosis, on some analysis, then you're just sort of talking out of your mouth, and there is no substance to what you're saying. I'll give you an example of this. One of the clients we were consulting for, a big IT company actually, their recruitment head came to me, and they said that, we want to deliver this training. So most of the time, we try and do a training needs analysis because it helps us to sort of ascertain the exact training needs and give targeted learning experiences which help in meeting the learning needs of clients. But in this case, the head of recruitment was very sure what they wanted. What they wanted was a training on confidence building and assertiveness for the recruiters, right? They wanted training on confidence building and assertiveness for their recruiters. So I was asking them, how do you know that this particular training is required? How do you know that confidence and assertiveness training is required? And they said, because when my recruiters make a decision and they say that, we have finalized this guy to hire, he or she has the required technical or the behavioral skills needed to be in the job. What happens is the operations guys overrule us, and they can actually, the operations or business can overrule our selection. But this happens in such a way that our recruiters don't raise their voice, they don't object, they don't even fight for their choice. They don't take a stand and say that no, I have interviewed this guy, he's good, and we should hire him. They don't say that. They just go with whatever the operations has said, and that sort of tells me that what they need is confidence, and that is why I'm recommending confidence training for them, right? And of course, this is what their initial assessment was. So you see, this is an example of the first point that this particular slide talks about. It's a perceptual error, right? Because here, what has happened is the head of recruitment has looked at a particular situation. He has seen a particular behavior that his team members are doing, and he has sort of analyzed it and come to a conclusion that it is because they don't have the confidence required to talk to operations, and therefore he thinks that they need training in confidence and assertiveness. Now, what happened was when we did we spoke to them and we sort of cajoled him into letting us do a training needs analysis. And when we did the training needs analysis, we found out that the reason the recruiters, the interviewers in this case, were not confident of their selection was because they felt that they did not know whether the person they had hired was good or not. They could not take a stand because they did not believe in the decision that they had made, right? The decision that they had made. So they could not believe in the decision that they had made, and the reason for that was because they felt they did not know how to select the right candidate. And they felt that they did not know how to select the right candidate because they felt they did not have the skill or the capability to interview somebody and find out if they had the required skills or not. So you see, this is what happened. The recruiters of the company felt that they did not know how to recruit or how to select. Maybe they knew how to recruit, but they did not know how to select. And because of that, they did not take a stand and take a stand about their hirees when it came to interacting with operations or the business. And as a result of that, the head of recruitment thought that they don't have assertiveness, they don't have confidence, and therefore he was going to send them for training in assertiveness and confidence. So we said, no, that's not the problem. Actually, you might want to, you might help increase their confidence and assertiveness, but that's not the issue here. The issue is not attitude. The issue is skill. They don't know how to do their job, and they don't know how to select. So we worked with the client on their selection process. We conducted a training for them, not on assertiveness, but on behavioral interviewing, on conducting interviews in a manner that they are able to select or reject the right candidate. And we saw positive results because of this particular outcome, because of this particular project. So very often, what you think is the problem might not be the problem. And if that is what is happening, that what you think is the problem is not the problem, then you really end up making mistakes in deciding whether to what kind of a solution you want in training. You'll address the wrong problem, you'll solve the wrong problem, and the problems you have ultimately won't go away because they won't be addressed, because they won't be solved. So, so this is one important aspect of training needs analysis. Yeah, so absolutely. So perceptual errors creep in. We think, I also remember another humorous incident. One of the top leadership of a particular organization, they told me, you should design a training program for my trainees on overcoming fear. And I said, why do you think they need training in overcoming fear? And he said, it's because they're all afraid of me. So you see, when we are imagining, when we are sitting and thinking about what do these people need in terms of training, there is a chance that perceptual errors will creep in. We will make mistakes about what we are trying to do. And wrong programs will get designed, or programs will get ill-designed. Not wrong programs will not get designed, but programs will be not completely designed. They'll not address the complete need, or they'll address a part of the need, or they will address some other need which is not crucial to their job. Learning needs are not met, inability to measure training impact. If you don't do training needs analysis, you don't have an understanding of what you are trying to impact in the organization. So after the training is over, if you want to measure what difference did the training make, you're again unable to do so because you did not do good training needs analysis in the first place, right? And of course, all of this leads to erosion of credibility of learning and development, right? You lose respect because when participants have to spend a full day or full 2 hours sitting in a training program that is not relevant to them, that does not speak to them, that does not help them where they are failing, that does not teach them where they are not succeeding, then they don't stop trusting the L&D department. So it's very, very crucial that we do this kind of thing where we effectively do a good, robust training needs analysis, and then design programs on the basis of that, and then develop programs on the basis of that, and then run those programs, and then measure the outcomes. That's why training needs analysis is important. Let's talk about how do we do training needs analysis? What do we do? How do we go about doing training needs analysis? So just want to talk about a few important methods. First of all, learning needs analysis is just like any other research project that you do, right? Any other subjective qualitative research that you do to find out something, whether it is in sociology, whether it is in anthropology, whether it is in market research, whether it is in training and development or HR, the research methods remain the same. You do not get new and different research methods just for learning needs analysis. Research methods remain the same, and the research methods that are available from the field of research are sort of learning needs analysis and learning needs analysis are role, task, skill analysis, questionnaires, focus groups, in-depth interviews. So what we will do in the rest of the webinar is we will look at all of these tools, and we'll see how we can deploy them so that they become useful to us. Right? So first of all, let's look at role, task, competency analysis. Right? So this is just a cartoon to sort of illustrate what we mean by that. So you can see he's saying, I am Nishant. My role is that of a team leader. So what is the role of the person? Right? And what is the task that they do? And what are the competencies that they demonstrate? Right? So for example, in this case, Nishant is a team leader. One of his tasks is to communicate with the client, and to do that task, communicate with the client, he needs the following competencies: report writing, email communication, assertiveness, negotiation skills, etc. Right? So we are saying this is Nishant, here is what he does, and to do this, this is what he needs to know, this is what he needs to be able to do, this is what he needs to be able to think, and therefore let's train him on what he needs to be able to do and think and say. So this is sort of a quick method, fast method. You don't need to go to anybody, you don't need to talk to anybody. All you need is a good job description or the competency indicators for that particular role, and you can look at it and you can create a competency analysis from it. So this is just to give you an example of what a sample RTC table could look like. You just write down the role of the person, the task of the person, the problem areas, and the development areas. So for example, let us say role is client communication. Role is, let us say, client manager. Task is client communication. Problem areas are, let us say, email writing and phone conferences. So development areas are written communication skills and two-way communication, and maybe handling conference calls or web conference calls, that kind of thing. They become your development areas, right? So this is how you can do a basic preliminary training needs analysis. No need to go anywhere, no need to do anything. Sit at your desk, look at the JD, find out what the role is, who is coming to attend the training, find out what they do and what they need to be able to know to do what they do, and then let that be the basis of your training program, right? So that is the simplest and the most basic way of doing a basic training needs analysis. But the interesting thing is that even this is not done sometimes, isn't it? People sort of just put their feet up on the table and say, you know what, these guys are maybe, let's say they are first time managers, so they must need training on delegation and they must need training on communication. Yeah, sure, that might be true. But what might happen is if you do a sample RTC table, you might find that for the first time, they will also be working on this new portal that they have never done before. And therefore they need training on how to use the portal. Or for the first time, they will now also be interacting with this particular, with a client, and therefore they need to be trained in that. So just saying that leaders must need training in delegation and performance management doesn't always cut it, because it's full of assumptions and perceptual errors, which makes it difficult to run, right? So the first, simplest, fastest, quickest method of doing training needs analysis is to do an RTCA. Right? Let's look at another method, right? Questionnaire method, right? So of course, all of you are familiar with questionnaire method. I don't need to tell you more about it. But the advantage of questionnaire method is that you get inputs from large number of people, You can compile the data, you can analyze the data, you can come up with some really impressive worksheets, impressive graphs, which can be used to um, see patterns in the organization. Everyone also gives a response to this sort of a questionnaire, and therefore you get a sense that everybody is involved in the process of designing the training. So when they come for the training, they are usually more involved and more interested in what is going to happen because they have participated in the process, right? The disadvantage, of course, is that it is sort of very quantitative and sterile, and you don't get a lot of data which you would otherwise have gotten by asking follow-up questions. Now, to ask follow-up questions, you can do in-depth interviews, right? In-depth interview is essentially before that, just go back. So you can design questionnaires using tools like SurveyMonkey, Zoho Survey, Google Forms, which just, if you want to do a simple survey, you can do it using Google Forms. It'll work just fine. And I strongly recommend those tools. Now let's look at in-depth interviews. In-depth interview actually is a good way of going about doing training needs analysis. And the way it works is you just block some time with one of the people you want to interview. You ask them to come into a cabin or a neutral meeting room. You tell them that you're doing a training needs analysis. The purpose of this conversation is to understand their learning needs, and the data that you're gathering will be used to design a training program. If they wish, their answers can also remain anonymous. Usually, I think it is a good idea to make sure that the answers are anonymous, because then you're able to get more honest responses from people. Right? So you have a half an hour to 45-minute discussion with them. So let me paint a picture for you. Let us say you have to train 200 people in an organization who are new managers. So what will you do? What kind of interviews will you conduct? So first of all, these 200 new managers, who do they report to? Maybe they report to business heads, unit heads, account managers. Talk to the account, do an in-depth interview of the account managers, maybe 5 to 8 interviews out of the 200 people who you have to train. Again, do interview of around 20 to 25. 200 is too large a number, so maybe if you do 10 to 15 interviews and then send a questionnaire to everybody else, that should do the trick. Right? So call people in, make them comfortable, offer them a glass of water, take them through your questions one by one. Don't hurry them up, don't interrogate them, don't start arguing with them, don't give your own opinion when you are doing an in-depth interview. This is called an in-depth interview, but it's not sort of like a journalistic interview where you have to make them defend what they're saying. It's more like you have to dwell deep into the psyche of the other person, get them to open up and share with you what they are feeling, what is actually going on. You're trying to get a handle on reality. So this is an effective method. Make detailed notes. If you want, also ask for permission, and you can do a recording of what the other person is saying. Usually a wealth of information is unleashed when people do in-depth interviews, right? Now, let's see some examples of this, right? So here are some typical questions you can ask in an interview to people who are going to attend your training program. So let us say these call center agents or first-time managers or directors are going to attend your training program, and you want to understand what kind of requirements they have. These are some questions you can ask. What is a typical day for you like? With whom do you interact? What are some typical situations, customers, and projects that you deal with? What are the most difficult aspects of your job? So remember, the important thing in an in-depth interview is that it should not become a general conversation about life and their work. It should not become a sort of uh, a chat about their grievances. You have to be focused on gathering learning needs, isn't it? So if they're having a problem with their computer, if they're having a problem with their project, if you're having a problem with their boss, they're having a problem with the software, canteen food, that's not really your concern. You are there to gather learning needs. I think a common mistake I have seen interviewers do is they get caught up in the conversation and they lose sight of their objective. Your objective is to understand what are the training needs of this person, which means what do they need to learn, right? What do they need to know? What knowledge do they need? What skills do they need? Do they need a change of attitude? These are the questions. Are there any beliefs of theirs that are stopping? Do they have misplaced values that is affecting them? So what exactly is impacting the performance of the person? Not everything that is impacting the performance of the person, but what do they need to learn that will improve their performance? That's what you need to. So I'll just give you a minute. Just go through these questions. You can ask them in the interview. All right. So I guess once the recording becomes available, you can pause and go through it in detail. I'll move on for now. Now, if you're interviewing the managers of the people who will attend the training, there are some questions you can ask them. What would you like your employees to do differently? How would you describe the current level of performance? So that's a very important question, actually. If you see the first question, what would you like your employees to do differently, isn't it? Because a lot of times managers want their team members to attend training, but they're not very clear on what would be different once people have attended the training. What do you want them to do differently? How will their behavior change after the training? How will their performance change? Will they start delegating more? Will you see more team meetings happening? Will you see more mails going around? Will you see customer satisfaction improve? Will you see absenteeism drop? Will you see what will happen as a result of your training program? That is a key question that needs to be asked. Right? So, what skills, knowledge, or behaviors do you think your employees need to acquire or improve on in order to do their jobs better? Another very, very important question that you can ask in an interview. So let's quickly review what we've done. So one of the ways of doing this is to do an RTCA. Sit down, look at the JD of the person or the competency indicators for the role, and then decide what kind of training they need. The second thing you can do is do an in-depth interview, call people into a cabin, preferably a neutral ground, offer them tea or water, talk to them, keep the conversation focused on learning needs and training needs, and don't let the conversation go all over the place and start talking about processes and systems and what's going wrong with the client and why the transportation is not good and that sort of thing. Keep the conversation focused. Another thing you can do excuse me. Another thing you can do is a focus group, right? A focus group is one where you sort of get everybody together, a sample group, sample representative group together in a room, and then you have a conversation with them and try and find out their opinion or their thoughts on what kind of training is required. Right? Again, this is similar to an interview. You want to have a qualitative discussion. You want to have a good long discussion about the learning needs, but you don't want people to feel defensive or afraid. So you want to create a safe environment where people can open up, they can share, and they can tell you what it is that they need, right? So one way of doing that is to have some quick icebreaker at the beginning, get people comfortable with each other, maybe set some ground rules to ensure everybody feels comfortable, and then conduct the focus group. Usually the way the focus group is conducted is you ask a question and the group discusses it for a while, and then you ask another question and then again the group discusses it. If somebody says something which is interesting and it starts taking your research in a direction that you want it to go, then you also allow that to happen. So that is what you can do in a focus group. Usually 45 minutes to 1 hour is good enough time for a focus group of around 8 to 10 people. And it's a good idea to have a video recorder or at least an audio recorder to ensure that you don't miss out on what people are saying. It's also a good idea that the facilitator of the focus group and the person who is furtively taking notes are different, so that points don't get missed out. You will generate a lot of qualitative data, and then you can look at the theme of the themes that run through that data and see if any of that is useful for you. Right? I think the questions given in this particular cartoon are very good. So for example, one of the questions you can ask is, at the end of this training, what learning do you hope to accomplish? How will you know that this has happened? What is one of the challenges that leaders face? So what questions do you ask is an important thing to consider. And I think one important question you can always ask is, where are people failing? Because if they're failing somewhere, it could be because they don't know how to do something, which could indicate a learning gap. So you can ask people to talk about a recent failure, and maybe not in a focus group because people might get defensive or they might blame each other. But in an interview, it's a good idea to ask people about a recent failure, and then ask them a question which goes something like, what is that if you had known to think, do, or in terms of expertise, that if you had that, you would be able to, you would not have failed in this particular situation, right? Basically, if you had learned something that would have prevented this failure, what would that learning have been? That's a good question to ask, actually, because then they are imagining that what do I need to learn so that this failure doesn't happen again. And so that's something I would recommend. Again, the advantage of focus group is you get the group's perspective. You must create a mixed group to get a variety of perspectives. So it should not. So if you're doing a training for first-time leaders, make sure you get some first-time leaders. You also get some. Some of their managers, some of their subordinates, some customers, some peers in other groups whom they interact with on a regular basis. It's important to get a sort of mixed group and get that response out. When you get a group, the learning needs get thrashed out. People share openly, they discuss openly about what's going on, and that sort of helps in getting the needs from your perspective, because you have to take all these needs and then design a program, right? You also sometimes, through these discussions, come upon a new insight which you would not get from individuals, and that's always a good reason to conduct a focus group. Now, so these are the methods we have discussed, actually. We have discussed focus groups, we have discussed interviews, we have discussed questionnaires, and we have discussed role task competency analysis. And I want to quickly share with you what is the secret sauce. And I think the secret sauce in this case is what we call triangulation, right? And what is triangulation? Triangulation simply means that you don't do one of these things or two of these things, but you do three of them, right? So you do an RTCA plus a focus group plus an interview, right? Or you do observation, an RTCA, and a focus group. Or you do, so for example, in our hypothetical case of 200 managers, 200 first-time managers, you do an RTCA to understand what all the new job entails, what competencies they need, and therefore what training they need. you do an in-depth interview with, let us say, 5 account heads and 10 participants, in-depth interviews, and then you do a focus group, maybe 3 focus groups with a mix of subordinates, managers, and their managers and clients to get a sense of what the need is. So if you do 3 of these things, chances are you will get much better understanding of what kind of training program you need to design to ensure that it has an impact. So if you have the time, I would strongly suggest, if you want to do it well, if you want to do it properly, if you want to do it in a manner that cannot be faulted, I would recommend that you do triangulation, which means you use 3 methods, not on everybody, but a sample goes through method 1, maybe a sample goes through method 2, another sample goes through method 3, and that should help you to do an effective training needs analysis. When training needs analysis is effective, then so is training design, and if training design is effective, then so is training impact. And that is what we want. Actually, we want training impact, because that will build organization capability, and that will help us succeed in the marketplace. So that's the flow. Right? So once you have done the training needs analysis, what do? You basically get a lot of data. If you have given people questionnaires, you get a lot of quantitative data. If you have done focus group or interview or RTCA, you end up with a lot of content written down, scripts, quotes from people. So now you need to sit down patiently with all of this and analyze the data. How do you analyze the data? Well, with quantitative data, it's very simple. There are different kinds of charts and figures and things like that, which you can use. But in the case of qualitative data, it's a little bit more difficult. But the way you have to do it is you have to look at all the content you have generated and then analyze it for themes. What kind of themes jump out at you when you look at this quantitative data? So you identify those themes and then see what people are saying about them, what variables emerge, and that's how you put together analysis. Right? Look at the data and then you determine your preliminary solutions or recommendations. Right? You look at what kind of data, what kind of recommendations you want to give. Now you will get an understanding of what people lack. Usually what happens is this is done in one of the 3 ways, right? You can knowledge, identify a lack of knowledge. There is something that people don't know that they should know. Skills, which means they are not able to do something that they need to be able to do. Or attitude, they are not able to believe something or feel something that you want them to feel. So usually one of these 3 will be shown as a lacunae, as missing in your analysis. Either knowledge is missing, which means there is some information that they don't have, or skill is missing, which means they're not able to do something, or attitude is missing, which means they're not able to feel or believe something. And then accordingly, you can recommend a knowledge-based program, a skill-based program, or an attitude-based program. Right? And then finally, you prepare the report, and then that captures everything you've done in your training needs analysis process. Right? Prepare a report. How do you prepare a report? So I thought I'll just give you a quick overview of what you can do to prepare a report. You can essentially have these following headers, these following chapters in your TNA report. You can start with an executive summary, just to give a quick overview of the findings of the entire training needs analysis process that you have undertaken. Description of methodology. So what did you do? Why did you do it? How you executed it? So for example, In our earlier example, we decided to do RTCA, in-depth interviews, and focus groups. We did RTCA on the basis of the competency matrix that was available in our HR archives conducted last year by an organization like Ripples Learning, which did our competency mapping for us. We did an in-depth interview of 5 account heads and 10 participant managers. We chose them on the basis of their tenure in the organization, their male-female ratio, on the basis of the variety of projects they lead, the number of people who report to them, etc. And we did 5 focus groups with around 10 members each, and we chose the focus groups on the basis of again, there's some criteria that we use. So whatever you did, you find that out. You decide how and why you did it, right? Summary of findings. So what did you find out? Give graphs, tables, charts. If you have a lot of thematic analysis that you've done, you might want to give a word map or themes, how they relate to each other. You can find new and interesting visual ways of representing that. You can do that. Preliminary conclusions, what you found out, what's the point of what you found out, and therefore recommendations. What do you recommend? What training is recommended? What kind of training should be designed? Anything else that comes into mind? Remember, this recommendation is not the training design. Design will happen after this TNA report is finalized, right? Or it is, you get an approval for it, and then people agree with your recommendation and they say, yeah, sure, go ahead, design a program for this. Then you go ahead and then worry about design. We'll talk about design in one of our upcoming webinars. A very, very interesting and exciting topic, design, because it tells you how you can ensure that the program is well designed and it's well run, well executed. It has taken everything into consideration. A lot of creativity possible in design as well. But diagnosis also is equally full of potential. Remember, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. You cannot recommend solutions unless you have done a diagnosis, because if you have not done a diagnosis, chances are your prescription suffers from judgment errors that you've made, perceptual errors that you've made, assumptions that you're making. You don't know you don't know what training people need. Is a useful assumption to live by, because the alternative is that you will end up choosing topics for people to attend a training on that they don't need, that doesn't help them. It wastes money, wastes time, wastes effort. So don't make that mistake. Do a good diagnosis. Find out. Be curious and find out what is it that people need to know to be able to do their jobs better. And then undertake the process of training needs analysis, and that will be helpful. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. You can type out your questions in the chat box that is available. While I wait for your questions, I'll just quickly summarize what we have done today. We started by talking about training needs analysis and why it is required. Organizations want to build capability. They want to build capacity. They want to, well, capacity is really about finding people, but they want to build capability. And training and development is one of the most critical ways in which capability can be built. But training and development needs to be done well. If not, then it leads to a huge amount of wastage of money, time, and effort. So how do you do training and development well? To do it well, you have to start it right. And to start it right, you have to do a training needs analysis, because prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So how do you do a good training needs analysis? Well, you first start with a sense of curiosity and not knowing that you know what everybody needs to learn. Don't go by your assumptions also, and don't go by the assumptions of top leadership also, because people often suffer from beliefs and preconceived notions that they might not be aware of. It's good if they have those notions, but it's bad if you make them the basis of your entire training design. It sort of creates a system which is bound to fail. So what you do is you start the process of TNA. You do it by doing a simple role task competency analysis. Simply look at the JD. What are the tasks they're doing? To do those tasks, what do they need to know? What are some problems they're having, and therefore what training is required? Another way of doing it is focus group. Get a group of them together in a room, create a safe environment where people can openly share, ask some questions, let everybody open up and talk about what prevents them from succeeding, what they wish they knew, what they wish they could do, and sort of try and get an answer. Do an in-depth interview, again, create a safe environment, ask people. I think don't take these last few questions I'm giving. It's important to have those questions properly written down and thought about. But remember, your questions should focus. Your questions should be such that they elicit learning needs and not other stuff. Remember, a learning needs analysis is not an employee satisfaction survey. So you don't want to sort of get people to air their grievance that they're having about the canteen food or the cafeteria or some transportation issue or hardware issue or process issue or how the client is treating them or how their team members are not interacting well with them. That's not the goal of learning needs analysis. The goal of learning needs analysis is what do they need to learn that will help them do their job better. So unless whatever they say is answering that question, your efforts are not going to have an impact, right? So yeah, so you do focus group, you do in-depth interviews, you can also do questionnaires, you can also do observation. You can do observation actually, you can see people at their job while, let us say you're doing a training for recruiters. You look at people doing their job and you can look at you can look at what they are doing and see how they are doing it, how they are conducting an interview, how they're conducting a team meeting, how they are going and talking to a client. See, just see, neutrally see, sit there silently and see, and notice what they are doing, and maybe capture it as per a pre-decided set of criteria. And that could be a valuable input for training needs analysis as well. So I think I have a question from Kumar Sai Deepak B. Hi, Kumar. Thank you for asking this question. He says, any special techniques are there for needs identification? Yes, Kumar, actually many important techniques are there, and we have discussed these techniques in today's session as well. What I would suggest is that once the webinar is posted, it's also streaming live on our Facebook page. So you can go to our Facebook page and see it there as well. When the webinar is posted, you can just listen to this webinar again from the beginning, and you will see that we discuss various techniques like focus group method, questionnaire method, in-depth interview method, observation method, role task competency analysis. You can revisit them and learn more about them. So I hope that answers your question, Kumar. Okay, great. So I think any more questions? If there are any more questions, we'll take those questions. Otherwise, we will close the webinar. All right. So thank you so much for attending the webinar. I hope it was useful for you. A Certified Human Resource Management Professional is a certification program in HR for those who are interested in making a career in HR, whether you are already in HR or you want to transition to a career in HR. CHRMP provides you with the skills, the competencies you need to succeed in the world of HR by ensuring that you learn skills that are relevant, that are useful, and that are appreciated and actually used in the real world. So the core driving force behind CHRMP is that it is focused on being impactful and useful in the workplace. So if you want to learn more about CHRMP, please visit www.chrmp.com and get a certification in human resources. Keep looking out for our webinars. We are planning to have a webinar every week. So chances are we will have webinars on training design as well. We'll also talk about other aspects of HR, everything from labor laws to compensation benefits. And you can learn a lot here, even if you don't go for the CHRMP program. You can learn a lot by being engaged with the webinars that we have. And it also gives us an opportunity to keep in touch with you. So that's good. Have a nice day and a good weekend. Thank you so much for coming here. Have a nice day and bye-bye.